Have you ever sat quietly and wondered when everything started to change between you and your children? Maybe it was subtle at first. A few days passed without a call, then weeks, maybe months. Birthdays started to feel quieter, holidays emptier. The laughter that once echoed through your home has faded into memory. You sit in the same living room where they used to scatter toys, where you once picked up their shoes, folded their laundry, made their favorite meals. Now the silence feels heavier than ever. And there's no big fight to point to, no final goodbye, just distance. Like an invisible wall slowly rising between your heart and theirs. You ask yourself the same quiet questions again and again. Did I do something wrong? Did I expect too much? Have they forgotten who I am to them? There are few pains more aching than the quiet neglect from your own children. It's not just about being left out, it's about feeling invisible to the people you poured your whole life into. But if you're listening now, I want you to take a deep breath with me, gently. Just for a moment, let yourself feel seen. Not because you have to prove yourself, not because you've done anything wrong, but because you're human, and because your heart still matters. This isn't a video about blaming them or blaming you. This is about finding your way back to peace without waiting for anyone to hand it to you. Let me tell you a little story. There was a woman named Laura in her early 70s. She used to get daily calls from her daughter Amber. They were close, or so she thought. Over the years, Amber's life got busier, new job, marriage, kids. The calls dropped to weekly, then monthly. Eventually, they came only when Amber needed something: babysitting, help, advice, a favor. Laura started noticing something painful. If she didn't reach out, there would be no contact at all, so she kept trying. Sending messages, leaving voicemails, baking cookies to drop off unannounced. She always smiled, always asked about the grandkids, never mentioned how lonely she felt inside. She thought if she just kept giving, maybe Amber would come around. But all it did was make Laura feel smaller, more invisible, as if her love had become expected, not appreciated. Until one day, after another missed holiday dinner and another polite, "Sorry, Mom, we've just been swamped," Laura sat in her kitchen, hands folded around a cooling cup of tea, and whispered to herself, "What if I just stopped chasing?" That question didn't come from bitterness. It came from a deep, tired honesty, a truth many of us don't dare say aloud. And so the first quiet thing she did was stop filling the silence. She didn't rush to text first. She didn't leave another voicemail just to hear her own voice echo back. She allowed the space to be empty, not as a punishment, but as an honest reflection of what was already happening. That silence, painful as it was, became her teacher. You see, when we stop chasing, we begin to notice who runs toward us and who doesn't. The second thing Laura did was this: she returned to herself. You may laugh and say, "What does that even mean?" But hear me out. So often, especially as parents, we lose pieces of ourselves over the years, not all at once, bit by bit. We trade our time, energy, passions, even our identity for the care of our children. And we do it with love. We do it without regret. But when they grow up and stop needing us in the same way, we're left standing there unsure of who we are without them. Laura hadn't painted in years. She used to love watercolors back when the house was quiet and her mind was still. One day she found her old brushes in a dusty box, and she started again, just for herself. No audience, no one to impress. She realized that part of her peace was never going to come from another phone call or an apology. It was going to come from reclaiming the parts of herself she left behind. That, my friend, is not selfish, it's sacred. And maybe you relate to Laura in more ways than one. Maybe you've bent over backward to stay close. Maybe you've tiptoed around your needs, softened your voice, stayed quiet when your feelings were hurt, all because you didn't want to push them away. But what if I told you that your silence, your sacrifices, your patience were never the problem? What if the real shift begins not when they change, but when you do? There's something powerful, something almost magnetic about a person who no longer seeks permission to be at peace. I once knew a man named Eric, a retired school principal, who spent years calling his son every Sunday without fail, rain or shine, even when his calls went to voicemail, even when they became shorter and more distracted. He said it felt like an obligation, like punching a time clock. One day he stopped calling, not in anger, but in quiet acceptance. He started going on long walks in the morning, joined a local book club. He bought himself a telescope, started learning the stars again like he did in college. Weeks later, his son called. "Hey, Dad, I just realized I hadn't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" Eric smiled. "Yes," he said, "everything is finally okay." That call didn't fix everything, but it came from a different place, not obligation, but curiosity, respect. Sometimes, when we stop chasing love, it finds its own way back to us. And sometimes, it doesn't, and that's okay too. Because peace isn't about controlling who calls or when. It's about knowing that your worth isn't hanging on the edge of a ringtone. It's steady, quiet, whole. And the first steps back to that peace, they begin in silence, in self-remembering, in doing things that make your heart feel full, not your calendar. There is dignity in choosing yourself. There is healing in letting go, not of love, but of the need to be needed in the same way you once were. You are not a forgotten parent. You are a whole human being worthy of joy, even in the stillness. It's a strange feeling, isn't it, to give so much of yourself to a role, to motherhood, to fatherhood, and then one day realize that role doesn't hold the same weight anymore. Not in their eyes, not in your daily rhythm. You wake up and the house is quiet, not just with sound, but with presence. And in that silence, something inside you whispers, "Who am I now?" That question isn't a sign of failure. It's the beginning of something quietly powerful. You see, many of us, especially those of us raised to believe that sacrifice equals love, have built our lives on giving, on overextending, on making sure everyone else is okay, even if it meant we weren't. We've carried their needs, their moods, their burdens on our shoulders for decades. And when they walk away, we're still holding all that weight. Only now, we're alone with it. There's something painful about realizing that what once felt like love might have become a pattern of self-forgetting. Take Brian, for example. He was the kind of dad who said yes to everything. When his daughter Tiffany moved across the country, he offered to help with the move. When she needed help with rent, he quietly wired the money. When she forgot his birthday 2 years in a row, he told himself she was just busy. But under all those yeses lived a deep fear that if he ever said no, she'd pull away even more. He had mistaken compliance for connection. It wasn't until he had a small health scare, a dizzy spell that landed him in the ER overnight, that he realized something. Tiffany didn't even know. He hadn't told her. Not because she didn't care, but because he had trained himself to expect nothing, to avoid being a burden. That moment changed something in him. Lying in that hospital bed, he thought, if I disappear tomorrow, would she even know who I am beyond what I've done for her? So the quiet thing Brian did was this: he stopped cushioning everything with yes. When Tiffany called one day to ask if he could co-sign another loan, he took a breath and said calmly, "Not this time." There was silence on the other end, surprise, maybe even a little hurt. But something unexpected followed: respect. Because when we start honoring our own limits, the people around us begin to see us differently. Not as fragile, not as dispensable, but as whole people. That doesn't mean they'll always understand, but it means you'll stop betraying yourself for scraps of connection. Melissa, a soft-spoken widow in her late 60s, once told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I used to think love meant never making waves, but now I think love, real love, sometimes shows up as a quiet line in the sand." For her, that line was learning to say, "That hurt me," without apologizing for it. Her son Brandon had developed a habit of speaking to her like she was a child, dismissing her suggestions, rolling his eyes, acting as if her age somehow made her less wise. For years she let it go, laughed it off, told herself he's just stressed. But one day, after another dismissive comment during a family dinner, she looked at him and said gently but clearly, "Brandon, I may be older, but I am not beneath you." The room went quiet. He blinked, a little stunned, and then something shifted. From that day forward, their conversations changed, slowly, imperfectly. But the way he looked at her held more weight, more pause, more care. Because the truth is, we teach people how to treat us by what we allow and what we don't. The fourth quiet thing that brings peace is this: standing in your dignity even when it shakes. It doesn't require shouting. It doesn't mean cutting people off or building walls. It simply means remembering that you matter and showing up in your life from that truth. So many of us were raised to equate self-worth with usefulness. If we weren't helping, fixing, serving, we felt invisible. And unfortunately, that often bled into how our children saw us too. But your worth was never meant to be transactional. You were allowed to take up space, to have preferences, to say no thank you, or this is not okay with me without fearing abandonment. Tiffany once told her dad after that conversation about the loan, "I just thought you liked helping me. I didn't realize it was hurting you." That opened a new door, a more honest one. Because when we stop playing the role we think they need us to play, we give them the chance to know who we really are. Not everyone will take that chance. Some won't understand. Others may distance themselves. But those who stay or return will do so on the foundation of truth, not guilt. And that, dear friend, is the kind of relationship that's worth having. You might be wondering, but what if they don't come back? What if I stand tall, reclaim my voice, and still the silence stays? Then let me gently offer this. Peace doesn't come from whether they call. It comes from what you tell yourself in the quiet. From walking past the mirror and seeing someone strong, not broken, whole, not waiting. From waking up and doing something that makes your soul feel alive, whether that's reading a book in the sun, tending to your garden, joining a choir, or simply sitting with a cup of tea and knowing that you are enough. Even if they never say it, even if they never see it. You see, this journey we're on, it's not about getting them to change. It's about gently turning inward, making subtle shifts, letting go of the desperate hope that they'll see us, and instead, choosing to see ourselves. And when that shift begins, even just a little, it radiates. You don't have to become loud. You don't have to explain yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up differently and let your presence speak for you. You may not have realized it at the time, but the moment you stopped chasing was the moment something inside you began to rise again. Quietly, gently, like a tide returning to shore. It doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it's just a breath, a pause between the old habit of calling first and the new courage to let the phone stay still. But over time, these small shifts start to change the atmosphere of your life. You start to walk a little taller, not because someone finally said you matter, but because you began whispering it to yourself. And the most beautiful thing, others begin to feel it, even if they can't name it. Let me tell you about Nicole. She was 68 when she stopped rearranging her entire schedule around her daughter's unpredictability. For years, Nicole would cancel her own plans just in case her daughter Amber might decide to drop by with the kids. She kept her weekends open, skipped out on social events, all for the hope of a visit. But the visits rarely came, and when they did, they were rushed, distracted, polite but distant. Nicole started to feel like a bench in a busy train station, always waiting, never sure when or if someone would stop. One Saturday, after another last-minute cancellation, Nicole opened her calendar and did something she hadn't done in years. She booked a weekend getaway, alone. A quiet cabin by the lake she used to love as a girl. She didn't ask permission. She didn't leave a just in case you dropped by note. She simply went. And something changed in her. She walked by the water each morning. She read poetry aloud to herself at night. She cooked only for one, and for once it didn't feel lonely, it felt free. When she returned home, there was a message from Amber. "Mom, we stopped by today, but you weren't home. Everything okay?" Nicole smiled. "Yes, sweetie," she replied. "I was away for the weekend, just enjoying some time to myself." That was the first time Amber asked, "What did you do? Was it nice? Maybe I could join you next time." You see, when we begin to live from our own joy, not as a performance, but as a quiet declaration, the people around us take notice. Not because we demanded it, but because self-respect has its own gravity. It pulls things into orbit, and even if it doesn't pull them closer, it brings you back to your own center. Eric, the man we mentioned earlier with the telescope, he once told me that finding peace didn't mean giving up on his son. It meant giving up the part of himself that believed he was only worthy when his phone rang. I realized, he said, that I'm not just a father. I'm also a man who loves the stars, a man who finds joy in morning coffee and classical music. I'm still becoming someone even at this age. And that's what many people forget. Just because you've lived a long life doesn't mean your story is finished. You are still becoming, still discovering, still allowed to grow, to surprise yourself, to feel alive in ways your children may never fully understand. That's not a tragedy. That's freedom. We often wait for our children to approve of our lives. We want them to say, "You did well." We hope they'll notice when we're struggling or recognize how much we gave up for them. But when that validation doesn't come, we begin to shrink. We turn inward, but not in the healing way, in the hurting way. We start to believe the silence means we're irrelevant. Let me say this as clearly as I can. You are not irrelevant. You are not in the way. You are not too much. You are not forgotten by the universe. Your voice still matters even if no one else is listening right now. Your joy is still sacred even if no one asks about it. And your life, even in this season of distance and uncertainty, is still filled with meaning. When you live from that truth, not just think it, but live it, something beautiful begins to unfold. You stop adjusting yourself to earn affection. You stop rehearsing what to say to avoid conflict. You start living in a way that feels honest, calm, whole. Laura the painter once showed me one of her finished pieces, a watercolor of a single empty chair by a sunlit window. Soft hues, delicate shadows. She titled it, "Peace Comes Anyway." I asked her what it meant. She smiled and said, "It means I stopped waiting for them to fill this space, and I started letting the light in instead." That's what this is really about. Not fixing them, not fixing you, but letting the light in. Even when the house is quiet, even when the phone doesn't ring, even when the mailbox is empty. Because peace doesn't arrive with noise. It often comes in the pause between tears, in the stillness of an afternoon, in the scent of a meal you made just for yourself, in the softness of a well-worn sweater and a favorite song playing low in the background. That is where life still breathes. And sometimes, just sometimes, when we've stopped needing anything from them, our children begin to notice. They may call, they may come, and when they do, they won't be meeting a version of you that's waiting and wounded. They'll be meeting someone whole, someone who has learned to love themselves, not in spite of the silence, but because they chose to honor their own voice within it. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. If you've stayed with me this far, I want to say something very simple and very sincere thank you. Thank you for your time, thank you for your openness, and most of all, thank you for your heart. I know this hasn't been an easy topic. Talking about distance from your children, the ones you raised, nurtured, lost sleep over, gave everything to it, stirs up so much tenderness, so many questions that don't have simple answers. But I also know something else, the fact that you're still here, still listening, still seeking peace. That tells me everything I need to know about your strength. There's a kind of quiet bravery in facing the ache and choosing not to let it harden you, in choosing instead to become softer with yourself, more patient, more curious, more willing to find meaning beyond the roles life once gave you. You've walked through a lot more than most people will ever realize. You've held tears behind your smiles, kept invitations open long after they were declined, and continued to show up with love even when it wasn't returned in the ways you hoped. And that love, it still matters, but so do you. You matter as a person, not just as a parent, not just as a provider of help or comfort or familiarity. You matter because your life is yours, and your story isn't over yet. If you feel moved to share something today, even just a little, I'd love to invite you to leave a comment below. You don't have to be eloquent, just honest. Has your relationship with your adult children changed over time? How have you coped with the silence, the distance, or the longing? You never know who might read your words and feel less alone. That's the beauty of sharing, not to vent, not to blame, but to let someone else know, hey, I've been there too. And if you felt something here, if this message made you feel a little more seen, a little more grounded, I would truly love for us to stay connected. This isn't just a video. It's a space for healing, a small corner of the world where your experiences are honored and your quiet growth is celebrated. So if it feels right to you, click subscribe. Not out of obligation, not to get more advice, but to keep walking together through these tender parts of life with dignity, with grace, and with the knowledge that you are never, ever alone in this. You see, aging isn't a fading, it's a refining. It's where all the noise starts to fall away and the essence of who we truly are begins to shine through. You are not past your prime. You are not behind. You are not less than you once were. You are deeper, wiser, softer in the best ways, stronger in the places that have healed, and freer than you've ever allowed yourself to be. Don't wait for them to call to feel worthy. Don't wait for the perfect visit or apology to let joy back in. Live now. Light a candle at dinner, even if you eat alone. Sing while you clean the house. Put flowers on your table just because they make you smile. Write letters you don't have to send. Dance in your kitchen. Laugh at the ridiculous things. Read books that transport you. Let silence become a friend, not a punishment. And when or if they do call, you'll answer not from a place of lack, but from abundance. Because you'll know deep in your bones that their love is welcome, but your peace is not dependent on it. You've reclaimed something sacred, yourself. So here's to the ones who choose peace without permission, to those who stop begging and start blooming, to those who learn to sit with themselves and say, "This is enough. I am enough." You, dear one, are more than enough. And wherever you are, whatever this moment looks like, may peace find you. Not loud and flashy, but quiet and steady, like a soft hand resting on your heart. You are not alone. You are deeply worthy. And I'm so glad you're here.